Up everybody, welcome back to the channel. Let's continue from where we left off in the previous video. So this is going to be part 2 of 3 of JavaScript basics. So we are just walking through the FreeCodeCamp curriculum, the JavaScript algorithms and data structures part of it. All right, so let's continue. So in this lesson, we are starting to look at what we called arrays in JavaScript. So far we've looked at variables. We've also looked at data types like numbers, strings, and now let's look at something called arrays. So what arrays does is that arrays allows you to store more than one item, okay, in a single variable. So like this sandwich, and sandwich is one variable and it can have peanut butter, jelly, and bread. So you can store all of these things in one array, which we are calling sandwich in this example. Okay, so we want to modify the new array, which we have here. My array currently is an empty array, and we want to modify it so that it contains both a string and a number. Okay, so let's give it a string. Let's just call it shirt. And then the items in an array are separated by a comma. So take note of that. And then I'll give it a number. Let's say 23. So yeah, that's Michael Jordan's jersey number. Okay, so let's move on. Now, one thing that we also need to take note of is that we can have an array inside an array, right? So for example, we have this array called teams. So we have teams here, and then inside the teams array we have another array with a string boost and a number 23, right? And we also have the second item is also an array. So this is what we call nested arrays or multi-dimensional arrays. So that is having arrays within arrays. Okay, so create a nested array called my array. So we have my array here, currently is empty. So we are going to start, I'm just going to say 1, which is the first item. And then the second item is going to be an array. We'll have a string, which is going to be Jordan. And I'll just say a number 23. Okay, let me add one more. So I'm going to say Kobe, which is going to be a string. So Kobe for Kobe Bryant, and the number is going to be 8. That was one of the numbers he wore. All right, so this is a nested array. So we have an array called my array, and inside it we have this array here and then also another array here. All right, let's continue. Okay, so next up, let's look at accessing array data with indexes. So in the previous video, we looked at how we can access a character of a string, right? And we said that if we want to access the first character, we can use the bracket notation and give it a value of 0, because JavaScript uses what is called zero-based indexing. So we start counting from 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. So the same thing works with arrays. So if we want to access the first item in this array, we can just say my array brackets and 0. So let's create an example. So create a variable called my data. I'm going to say const my data and set it equal to the first value of the array. So I'm going to say my array bracket notation and then 0. Okay, so now let's do a console log of my data and see what we have. My data, and as you can see, we have the first value, which in this case is 50. Okay, all right, so that's how we access the array, the elements of an array using the index. Okay, so if we give it index 1, you see we have 60. If we give it index 2, we have 70. All right. Okay, so let me change this back to 50. and then let's run the test. Oops, should be 0. Yeah, so now we have 50 here. Okay. Moving on, let's look at how we can modify or change the items in an array. So when we looked at strings, we said that strings are not mutable, so we cannot change the values of strings using the bracket notation. But with arrays, we can. Okay, so modify the data stored at index 0 of my array to a value of 45. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a console log of my array. Okay, and I'm just going to say, before, just for you to get a better understanding. I'm going to say before, and then I'm also going to say console.log. I'm going to say after. Okay, my array. All right, so now let's look at what happens when we change the value. So first, you see that both before and after have the same thing. So we have 18, 64, 99. That's because we haven't done anything yet. But watch what happens when I do my array at index 0 is equal to 45. Okay, so now see, before we have 18, 64, 99. But after changing the value of the item with index 0, the first value changes to 45. Okay, so that's what we mean by arrays are mutable. Okay. All right, next up, let's look at how we can access nested arrays or multi-dimensional arrays. So here we have my array, which is this, and within my array we have arrays like this, and even this is an array which also has nested arrays. So we have the arrays has multiple dimensions. We have arrays nested within arrays, and the way we can, for example, select this number 8 is to first select this whole array, which is index 2. So because the first item is 0, 1, and 2. Okay, so we write const my data, so my array, and then we say this one is going to be 2. Okay, and then this will lead us to this array right here. And then inside this array, we know that this one is the 0 index, and this one is 1 index or index 1. So we're going to change the 0 to index 1. Okay, so I'll say 1 like so. All right, now, so we're told to use the bracket notation to select an element from my array such that my data is equal to 8. So let's do a console log of my data. As you can see, my data is equal to 8. Okay, so first we select the item with index of 2. So we come to my array, we say 0, 1, 2. And then we select the item inside index 2 with an index of 1. So we say 0 and then 1. That's why we have 8 here. All right. Okay. Now let's look at how we can change or manipulate arrays using something called the push method. So what the push method does is that it adds a new item to the end of the array. Okay, so we have an example here which is 1, 2, 3. When we do array.push, it's going to change this and add 4 to it. So let me just copy it just so we see what is happening. Okay, and I'm going to do console.log r1. Now, as you can see, instead of 1, 2, 3, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 has been added to the end of the array. That's what the push method does. So what we want to do is we want to push this array called with dog and tray to the end of my array. So there's my array. So I'm going to do console.log before, and I'll do my array. Okay, I'm just going to duplicate it, copy and paste, and then I'm going to say after. So we want a before and after. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to use push on my array. So we say my array dot push, bring our parentheses, and then inside the parentheses we want to add what we want to push into the array. So we'll say dog, comma, and then the number 3. So as you can see, before using the push method, we have just these two items, John 23, cat 2. But after the push, we have this right here added to the array. Okay? All right. Okay. Another way we can also manipulate the array is with a method called pop. So the pop method, so the push method adds a new item to the end of the array. The pop method is sort of the opposite. What it does is that it takes the last item out of the array. Okay, so we have an example here, and what we want to do is that we have 3, 1, 4, 6. When we do, let me just copy it so that you see what's happening. Okay, so we have const 3r, which is 146. Then we did const 1 down, which is 3r.pop. So that took away the last item, which is 6. Okay, so when we console log 1 down is the value of the last item, which is 6. So that's what we see here. And then now when we console log the 3r array, we have only 1 and 4. 6 has been taken out. All right. So use the pop function to remove the last item from my array, and assigned the popped off value to a new variable called, let me just copy it, removed from my array. So you're going to say console const remove from my array, that's the variable name, and we'll say my array dot pop, and we are going to say dot pop. So that's it. Now when we do a console log of my array, watch what happens. You see, we only have John 23. Okay, and also when we do a console log of removed from array, we have cat 2. So cat 2 has been removed from my array. All right, let's continue. Oh, why did I delete it? Yeah, manipulate arrays with a shift method. Okay, so we've been looking at the push and pop method. So push adds a new item to the array at the end, and then pop takes away the last item from the array. Now what the shift method does is that it adds a new item, but not at the end. It adds a new item at the beginning of the array. Okay, so use the shift function to remove the first. Sorry, shift does not add, it removes the first item in the array. Yeah, so I want to use the shift item to remove the first item in my array. All right, so the way we're going to do that is we're going to say my array dot shift, bring our parentheses, and then that's it. So now let's do a console.log of my array, and as you can see, the first item has been removed, so we only have dog and then 3. Okay, so we are also supposed to assign it to a new variable called remove from array. So let me just create that variable. So I'm just going to say const remove from my array equal to. All right, so that's it. Okay, let's continue. So now we've looked at shift method, and shift method takes the first item out of the array. The opposite of the shift method is what we call unshift. So the unshift method, instead of taking away, adds a new item to the array, and it adds it at the beginning of the array. Okay, so we want to add this item, which is an array with a string Paul and the number 35 to the beginning of my array using unshift. So you're going to say my array dot unshift, and we're going to bring our parentheses, and inside our parentheses we add the new array, which has a string of Paul and a number of 35, like so. All right, now let's do a console log of my array. And as you can see, this shift takes away the first item. So John 2, 3 is taken away, which will leave us with only dog and 3. And then unshift adds Paul 35 to it. So we end up having Paul 35 and then dog 3. Okay. All right. On to the next one. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to create a shopping list in the variable my list, which we have here, and it's going to be a multi-dimensional array or nested array with subarrays. So the first element in each subarray should contain a string with the name of an item, and then the second element should be a number representing the quantity. Okay, so let's say this is a shopping list. So the first item is going to be I want to buy, let's say meat. I want to buy 5 quantity of meat, and then we also want to buy milk. I want to buy just 2 quantity of milk. Thirdly, we are told to have at least 5 of them. So thirdly, we want to buy spaghetti. Want to buy 10 quantity of spaghetti. Don't forget to add your comma. We also want to buy what else can we buy? Oil. And want to buy just one, maybe 1 gallon of oil. And then finally we want to buy, what else can we buy? Honey, and want to buy 2 bottles of honey. So like this. Okay. All right. Now let's look at something in JavaScript that we call functions. So functions are a very central part of JavaScript, or a very important part of JavaScript. So what functions does is that with functions, we're able to write code that you can use over and over again. Okay. So the way you write function is to say function, use the function keyword, and then the name of your function. Usually the name is going to be what the function does. So for example, you can call it say hello. It could be anything. Then you bring a parenthesis like so, and then you bring your curly braces like so. Okay, so first you write the keyword function. Next you write the name that you want to give to the function, which, like I said, is usually has to do with what the function does. And then you bring your parenthesis, and then after your parenthesis you bring your curly braces. So within your curly braces is where you are going to write the code that your function will perform. So for example, I can say console.log. This is going to log to the console, which we have here. Console.log hello world. Okay, so now I have defined the function here, but for me to use the function I have to call it. So I have to say hello, then I call it like so. Now once I've called it, you can see hello world printed in the console. Okay, all right, so you first define your function, and then when you want to use it, you call it like so. So you write the name of the function, you bring your parenthesis. Okay, now let's see what we are supposed to do. So we are told to create a function called reusable function. I'm going to copy this. And then what this function does is print the string hi world to the developer console, which we have here. And then we are going to call the function. So let me give some comments. So I'm going to say step 1. Step 1 is to create a function. You don't need to do this, but I mean, it helps for you to understand better. So step 2, I'm going to say call the function. Okay, so first let's create the function. And what do we do when we are creating a function? We write the function keyword, then the name of the function. In this case, the name of the function is reusable function. We bring our parentheses and then curly braces like so. So now inside the curly braces, we are going to write what the function should do. In this case, we want to print to the console or log to the console the string hi world. String should be in quotation marks, don't forget. Hi world, like so. Okay, now let's call the function. So like I said earlier, to call the function, you write the name of the function, which we've named as reusable function, and then you bring parentheses like so. So there we have it. We've created a function and we've called it hi world. Okay. Next up, let's look at how we can pass values to function using what we called arguments. Okay, so functions can do a lot of things. So for example, you can have a function, okay, and let's call it add numbers. Okay, so that's the function. Okay, now we can just say console.log to the console 2 plus 3. Okay, now let's call the function add numbers, and as you can see, it gives us 5. Okay, we can write this, which is correct, but we can also make it dynamic. So for example, instead of saying 2 plus 3 here, we can say x. You can just say x and then y. Okay, or first num. Let's make it more descriptive. First num, which stands for first number, and then second num, which stands for second number. Okay, and then instead of using 2 plus 3, we say first num plus second num. Okay, now what happens is that when we call the function, we can give it a first number and then we can give it a second number. So in this case, we can give it 2 and then we can give it 3, and then we'll have our 5. So this makes it dynamic because we can change this and give it 20, 30, which gives us 50, or we can just give it 10 and 0, which gives us 10. Okay, so these are what we called arguments, the values that we provide them, the function. And then this is what we call a parameter. So this is a placeholder. Okay, when we are defining our function, we use first num as a placeholder. So we call this parameters. But when we actually call the function, the values that we give it is called arguments. All right, so I'll clean this up and let's see what we are supposed to do. So we are supposed to create a function called function with args. So I'll just do this, say step 1. Again, you don't have to do this, but I'm doing this just because I'm teaching and I want you to get a better understanding. Step 2, call the function. Okay, so for step 1, we create a function, write our function keyword, bring the name of the function, parentheses, and then our curly braces, like so. Now, what should this function do? It should accept 2 arguments. Okay, so 2 arguments. We say first arg, or you can call it anything you want. let's say first num, or let me just say first arg, because it could be a number, it could be whatever. And let's say second arg. Okay, so it accepts 2 arguments and output their sums to the console. So I'm going to say console.log, and then we'll say first arg, whatever the value is, plus second arg, whatever the value is. Okay, now step 2, call the function. So what do we do when we want to call the function? We write the name of the function, bring our parentheses like so. Okay, now it says none, N-A-N. That's because we haven't given this any number yet. Okay, so let's call the function with 2 numbers. So I'm going to say 5, that's the first number I'll use. Now say 6, that's the second number. So we get a value of 11. All right. Okay, so now let's look at what we call the return keyword. So we can use it to return a value from a function with return. Okay, so far what we've been doing is we've been logging to the console the value that we want the function to give us. But we can use something called the return keyword. Okay, so let's create a function that accepts 1 argument. So first function, the name is going to be times 5, and it's going to accept 1 argument. So let's give it num. Again, this is a variable or a placeholder, so you can use anything that you want, but give it something more descriptive. That's why I'm using num, standing for number in this case. You bring your parentheses, and then we want to multiply the argument by 5. So we're going to say num times 5. Okay, but we want to use the return keyword. So return. Okay, so the function is going to return or output the value of num, whatever num is, times 5. Okay, all right, so let's check it out. So times 5, let's give it a value of 2. Okay, now let's console log it and see what we get. So console log, let me bring a closing parenthesis here, and as you can see we have 10. If I change it to 5, we'll have 5 times 5, which is 25. If I change it to 100, we'll have 5 times 100, or 100 times 5, which is 500. Okay. All right. Next up, let's look at something called global scope. So when we say scope in JavaScript, it refers to, like we have here, the visibility of variables, or how we can access those variables. So global scope has to do with creating creating a variable that is not within a function. So you can create a variable outside of a function, or you can create a variable within a function. Anytime you create a variable outside of a function, that variable can be accessed anywhere at all in your code. But when you create a variable within your function, it can be accessed only within that function. Okay, when I say within that function, I'm talking about anything that is between these curly braces. Okay, now one thing you must note is that when you declare a variable with the var keyword, it has a global scope. So usually the best practice is to declare a variable with let or const. Don't declare variables with var keyword. Use the let or const keyword. All right, so using let or const keyword, let's declare a global variable named my global. And like I said, it should be outside of any function for it to be global. So let's declare, let's say let my global. Okay, and let's give it a value of 10, like we are told. That's the initial value. All right, now inside the function fun1, which we have here, there's a function fun1. So inside it, we want to assign 5 to oops global. So what we're going to do is say let oops global equal to, let's give it a value of 5. Okay, so we are supposed to declare oops global without using the varlet or const keyword. So let me just delete this one. So oops global is equal to 5. All right, now as you can see here, my global is 10 because we can access it from anywhere. We can access it from this function. Okay, and oops global is also 5. But forget about this code for now. We'll get into it later and understand what all of these mean. So for now, just ignore it. Now, what you need to keep in mind is that when you declare a variable outside of a function, it is a global variable and it can be accessed anywhere in your code. Okay. Now let's look at another thing called local scope. So global scope is when that variable can be accessed anywhere. Okay. But with local scope can only, a variable declared within a local scope can only be accessed within that function. Okay, so let's see an example. We have, let me copy this. I'm going to paste it here. So we have my test, which is the name of the variable, and say const lock is equal to foo. We have console.log foo. Okay, now let me comment this out so that we don't have any error. Okay, now as you can see, when I run my test, okay, this console.log works because you can see 4 here. But then when you do console.log outside of a function, it says lock is not defined. That's because inside the function, this console.log statement is within the same scope as the function that we have declared here. But this console.log.state statement is not within the same scope, it's outside of the function. So you cannot access the function outside of the function. That's why this is giving a reference error. Okay, so let me take it back to how it was. All right, now let's see what we are supposed to do here. The editor has 2 console.logs. As you can see, we have one here and one here. Check the console as you code to see how it changes. So first, declare local variable my var inside my local scope. So this is my local scope function. I want to declare a variable called my var. So const my var, and let's give it a name or a value. Let's say some string, or let's just call it local scope. Okay, as you can see, we have inside my local scope, and then we have local scope here, which is this console log. Okay, so this console log works perfectly because it is within the same scope as the variable. But then this second console log doesn't work because it is outside the same scope as the variable it is trying to access here. That's why we see a reference error. All right. On to the next one. Okay. So now let's do an exercise that will help us appreciate global scope versus local scoping functions. Okay. So we want to add a local variable to my outfit function, which we have here, my outfit function, to override the value of outerwear. So as you can see, currently the value of outerwear is t-shirt. Okay. Now, when we want to change the value of outerwear, we can just say anywhere in our code. So for example, within this function, say const outerwear and say sweater. Okay, so now let's do a console log. and let me say outerwear. Okay, let me just change this. Yeah, so as you can see, console log of outerwear, we get t-shirt. That's not what I was expecting. Okay, so let's do this. Console.log my outfit. Now as you can see, we have sweater. Okay, so even though this is declared outside with the value of t-shirt, because we have the same name, as you can see, this outerwear and this outerwear, the local variable or the variable within the local scope takes precedence over the global variable. Okay, so anytime you have two variables with the same name and one is a global variable and one is a local variable, the local variable always takes precedence. Okay, all right. Okay, now let's try and understand undefined value returned from a function. So what does undefined means? So a function can include a return statement, but it doesn't have to. So you can have a return statement in a function or not. Okay, and when your function does not include an explicit return statement, JavaScript would return an undefined value. Okay, so let's see an example. So create a function add 5 without any argument. So first, let's create the function add 5 and we won't give it any argument. Okay, the function adds 5 to the sum variable, but its return value is undefined. So we're going to say sum plus equal to 5. Okay, so this is the same as writing sum is equal to sum plus 5. Okay, so it's the same thing. So I'm just going to use the plus equals operator. All right. Now, assuming we do this, okay, now let me add console log so that you get an understanding of what we are doing here. Let me add another console log to this. Okay, now you see over here sum is declared as 0. Okay, so when we call add 3, we get an undefined, and that's because we are not returning anything from here. Okay, but when we call this one, we are not getting undefined, we are getting 5 because we are returning the value that we are getting, which is 0 plus 5. We are returning it. So because we are returning it, we have the output. But assuming I should reduce or remove the return keyword, then we also have undefined for the function add 5. So that's what we are talking about. When you don't return explicitly a value from a function, JavaScript will return undefined. Okay. All right. Okay, so our test is failing. All right. Once both functions have run, the sum should be equal to 8. Okay, so let me remove these console logs from there. Okay, so inside the add function, add 5 function, you should add 5 to the sum variable. Okay, let's see. Sum is equal to sum plus 5. All right. Okay, now let's see an assignment with a return value, which we already discussed. Okay, so call the process arg function. We have the process arg function here with an argument of 7 and assign its return value to the variable processed. Okay, so we can assign the return value of an argument to a variable. So let's see an example. So we can just say const let's say processed, that's the name we want to use. No, sorry, processed is already defined here and given an initial value of 0. So I don't need to redeclare it. I just need to say processed equal to. Now we are told to call the process arg function. So I'll say arg. Then we are supposed to call it with a value or with an argument of 7. Okay, like so. Now let's do console log of process. And as you can see, we have a value of 2. And that's because we are calling process arg, giving it a value of 7. So this process arg, giving it a value of 7. So num will be 7. So 7 plus 3 is 10. So 10 divided by 5 will be 2. That's why we have 2 here. Okay? All right. Okay. Now, in computer science, we have something called a queue. So a queue is just like the same concept of how we have queues in real life. Okay, so it's a system where items are kept in order. That way you can add new items to the back of the queue, and then you can take new items off from the front. So let's say you are going to a movie and you are in line for your ticket. The new people who come late will have to join the queue from the back, and then those who are already there will be served, so that when you are served, you move away from the front. So that's the same concept. Now, let's write a next in line function, which you've already been given a starter code here. So this function is going to take an R, which is an array. R stands for array. Okay, it can be anything, but we are told it's an array. And a number, and the name of the number is called item. So first, we want the function to add the number, which is item, to the end of the array. Okay, so we'll say, so remember what we did, the push method. So we say r.push, and want to add item, which is the number. Okay, now see what happens here. So before we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we are using this as an example. Okay, so we have a test array here that we are using to test the code we are writing. Okay, you don't need to understand all of these, but that's the test that we are using. So before we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But then after adding this line, r.push item, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is the item we have here, the argument you are giving. So 6 is added to the array. Then we also want to add a number to the end of the array, then remove the first element from the array. So if you remember, we did shift method. So we say r.shift. And as you can see, the first item, which is 1, has been removed from the array. Okay, all right. Wait, the next inline function should return the element that was removed. Okay, so we need to give this element that was removed, assign it to a function. So let's say let's removed element. You can call it anything you want actually. And we'll say return, instead of returning item, we want to return the element that was removed. So removed element. All right, there you go. Okay, now let's look at what we call Boolean values. So far we've looked at different data types. We've looked at numbers, we've looked at strings, we've looked at arrays, and we've also looked at undefined. So another type of data or data type is what we call Boolean. Now Boolean can just be one of two things, either true or false. Okay, but one thing you have to notice that a string of true, so this in JavaScript, this is different from this. Okay, so this true here is a Boolean, but this true here is a string. Okay, so you have to take note of that. Okay, so let's see what we are supposed to do. So modify the welcome to Booleans function, which we have here, welcome to Booleans. so that it returns true instead of false. Okay, so currently it is returning false. We just want to change it to return true. And I'll say run test. All right, so that's it. Okay, so as a reminder, let me say that I am going to leave timestamps below in the description. So if you can't watch the whole video at a go, you can pause, and then whenever you come back, you will know exactly where to continue when you look at the timestamps. All right, so just take note of that. All right, let's continue. So now let's look at something we call conditional logic in JavaScript. And we use conditional logic with something called if statement. Okay, so if statement basically helps us to make decision in code. So we just want to say if something happens, do another thing. Okay, so if the weather is clear, go out. If the weather is not clear, stay indoors. All right, so let's see an example of if statement. So I want to create an if statement inside the function to return yes, that was true, if that parameter was that true is true, and no, that was false otherwise. Okay, so we have this function here, and the way we use if statement is just write if. Okay, like so, you write if, you bring your parentheses, and then you write whatever condition that you want to use. So in this case, the condition we want to use is was that true? That's our condition. Okay, and then you bring your curly braces. Right, so let me do it again one more time. So you write if, you bring your parentheses, then you bring your curly braces. So inside the parentheses, you write your condition. Okay, in this case, our condition is was that true? Okay, and then we say that if that was true, return the string yes, that was true. Okay, and if that was not true, or if that was otherwise, want to return the string. So we go out of the curly braces and return the string no, that was false, like so. Okay, all right, so that's how we use if statement. Okay, so now let's look at the equality operator. So in JavaScript, when you want to compare two items, we use what we call the equality operator. And one of the ways we can do that is to use what we call the loose equal or double equals. So as you can see, we have two equal signs here. Okay, so when you use the double equals, we can compare a value like 1 and 1, which is equal, so we have true. 1 and 2 is not equal, so we have false. So 1 and 1 here are true when you use the double equals, and that's because when you use the double equals, this is a number and this is a string. But what JavaScript will do is that JavaScript will convert this into a number or convert this into a string. So make them all the same type and then compare them. So when you compare this into a number, 1 is equal to 1. So you have true. The same thing with this as well. Okay, so now let's add the equality operator to the indicated line. Change this line, which we have here. And so that the function will return a string equal when val is equivalent to 12. So I'm just going to say val equal, double equals, don't forget, and I'll say 12. Okay, so now let's do a console log and see what happens. So console log test equal like so. So now when it's 10, it returns not equal because the value we gave it, val, is not equal to 12. But what if it is 12? Then it returns equal. Okay, so you can play around it and see what happens when you change the values. All right, so there's another also equality operator what we call strict equals. So instead of the 2 equals, that will be 3 equals. So use 3 equal signs. And with this and this is true, but this 3 and this string of 3 is not true. And that is because this 3 has a type of number, or is a number, and this is a string. So unlike the previous one where JavaScript will convert them so that they will all be of the same type, this strict equal works strictly. So there will be no conversion. We'll just compare the values as it is. Okay. So let's use strict equal operator in the if statement. So the function will return the string equal when val is strictly equal to 7. So I'll say val using the strict equal to 7. All right, now let's do a console log. Okay, and I'll give you the value of 7, and as you can see, it returns equal. But what if I make this value of 7 a string by adding quotation marks? Okay, now even though this is 7, it says not equal. That's because this 7 is not a number, it's a string, and it is strictly not equal to this 7, which is a number. Okay, on to the next one. So practice comparing different values. Okay, so in JavaScript, we can determine the type of a variable or a value using what we called type operator. So for example, I can say console.log type of, okay, and let me say 10. And as you can see, we have number. So let me just duplicate it and say type of. And as you can see, this is a number, this is a string. So even though they are both 10, they have different types, or they are different data types. Okay, so when you use the strict equal, they are not going to be the same. Okay, so let's see what the challenge is specifically. So the compare equality function, which we have here, okay, in the editor compares two values using the equality operator. Modify the function so that it returns the string equal only when the values are strictly equal. So instead of using this double equal, I'll use triple equal or strict equal. Okay. All right. So now when you do compare, let's say console.log, you see it says 10 and 10 are not equal. But when you remove the strict equal and use double equal, it says 10 and 10 are the same. All right, let's move on. Okay, so comparison with the inequality operator. So just as we have an equality operator, we also have inequality operator in JavaScript. It's just the opposite of the equality operator. So it's the same way we have, instead of using 2 equal sign, you use the not symbol, which is the exclamation mark, and then you add 1 equal sign. Okay, so add the inequality operator in the if statement so that the function will return the string not equal when val is not equivalent to 99. So we'll say when val is not equivalent to 99. Again, you can do console log of this function call here, and then change the values, play around with, and see how it works. Okay. All right, let's go on. So in the same way, we also have the strict equality. We also have strict inequality, and that works, or the syntax for that is the not symbol or the exclamation mark, and then 2 equals. Okay, so that's strict inequality. All right, so add the strict inequality to the if statement so that it returns not equal when var is not strictly equal to 17. So I'll just say not strictly equal to 17. All right, once again, you can just console log it and then play around with the values, different values, and see how the result behaves. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, so now let's look at comparisons. So let's start with what we call the greater than operator. So in JavaScript, you can compare whether values are greater than or less than. Okay, so when you want to compare greater than, it's the same as what you do in maths. You use this greater than symbol here. Okay, so add the greater than operator to the indicated line so that the return statement makes sense. Okay, so here the return statement is over 100. So I'll change this line to val greater than 100. Then here I'll change it to val greater than 10. Okay, again, I will encourage you to console log this, try it out with different values and see how it works. But let's go on. All right, now let's do comparison with greater than or equal to. So with greater than, you just look at whether the values are greater than the provided value. But greater than or equal to, like the name suggests, checks whether the value is greater than or equal to the value. So we'll say value greater than or equal to, that's how we write it, 20. So we return 20 or over. Okay, we'll say val greater than or equal to 10, and we'll return 10 or over. All right, let's move on. So like we have the greater than and greater than or equal to, we also have less than or equal to. So let's start with less than. So less than, this is the value, we say less than 25, and there's the syntax, sorry, not value, the syntax, we say less than 25, sorry, this is 55. All right, there we go. Now let's look at less than or equal to operator. Okay, it works the same way as the greater than or equal to. So less than, bring the equal to sign, just say 12, so you return smaller than or equal to 12. And for this, we'll say less than or equal to 24, and we'll return smaller than or equal to 24. Okay, on to the next one. All right, now let's look at comparisons with what we call the logical AND operator. So this is the syntax for the logical AND operator. You write two AND symbols like this. This is the syntax. Okay, so let's see how it works. So here we have a nested if statement. So we have if, and the condition is num is greater than 5, then continue checking that if none is also less than 10, and then return yes. If not, then return no. So we can also write this same if statement with a nested if statement as this. So if we have our first condition here, num is greater than 5, and we use the logical AND operator, then num is also less than 10. So in this case, this condition has to be met. Num should be greater than 5, and num should also be less than 10. And if these both conditions are met, our function will return yes. If not, then our function will return no. Okay, so let's replace this nested if statement with the logical AND operator. So we'll say if, bring our curly braces, our parentheses, and then our curly braces. And then inside our parentheses, we'll say val is, one check if val is less than or equal to 50. So first, val is less than or equal to 50. And then end, logical end, like so. We say val is less than, no, val is greater than or equal to, so greater than or equal to 25. Now, if both of these conditions are met, we want our function to return yes. So this right here is the same thing as this. And as you can see, this is easier to read and a lot cleaner than this. So I'll just clean this up and run the test, and there you go. It works just as before. Okay, so just as we have the logical AND operator, we also have the logical OR operator. So with the logical AND operator, two conditions, both has to be true before we can return whatever we want to return. But with the logical AND operator, one of two, either one has to be true before we can return what we can return. So we have an example here. If num is greater than 10, return no. Also, if num is less than 5, return no. So you can just write it the same way. If num is greater than 10, or this is the logical OR operator. Num is less than 5, then return no. It's the same thing. Okay. So let's switch this two if statements and have one if statement where we're going to say if val is not between 20 and if val return outside if val is not between 10 and 20. Okay, so val, if val should be between 10 and 20, then it means it should be greater or equal to 10, or it should be val should be less than or equal to 20. And if that's the case, want to return outside. Okay, so there's something wrong here. All right, so combine the two if statements which we have here into one statement which returns the string outside if val is not between 10 and 20 inclusive. Okay, so first, if val is less than 10, is not, then it means it's not between 10 and 20. Okay, and also if val is greater than 20, it means it's not between 10 and 20. Okay, so I think this should work. Okay, let me see. Combine the two if statements into one statement which returns the string outside. Oh, okay, let me remove this first. Yeah, so it was the code that I didn't remove that was what was worrying. All right, let's continue. All right, now let's introduce something we called else statement. So far, we've only been using what we call the if statement, but you can also have something called if statement. So if, for example, if the weather is good or clear, go outside, else stay indoors. Okay, that's just a basic example. So let's combine the if statement into an if else statement. Okay, so we have if 5 is greater than, if val is greater than 5, result is going to be bigger than 5. So instead of having another else statement here, another if statement here, we can just say else. Then let's remove this condition. So else result is equal to 5 or smaller. Okay, that also works the same way. All right. Then we also have what we called else if statement, and with that we can use it to chain multiple if statements. Okay, so for example, we have if num is greater than 15, return bigger than 15. Else if it is less than 5, return smaller than 5. Else return between 5 and 15. So we can chain as many else if statements as you want. So convert the logic to use else if statements. So we say if val is greater than 10, return greater than 10. Else, so we just say else if val is greater than or less than 5, return smaller than 5. Else, so just say else, I'll just copy this, cut it out here, and put it inside here. So else, return between 5 and 10. All right. Now, logical order in your if statement matters, okay? You should take note of the order, because if you don't take note of the order, you might get results you don't expect. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm just going to say for, and for has an order of less than 1, less than 2, and everything else. So I'll say less than 1 comma less than 2 others, okay? And let me paste for here. I just want to show you an example so that you get a better understanding. And okay, this is for function, not foo. Then the second one is bar. Okay, so I'll say bar, and then bar is first, the order is less than 2, less than 1, and others. So less than 2, less than 1, and others. Okay, so let's copy bar. All right, now let's call both functions, and we are going to give them the same value, which is 0. Okay, now let's console them out and see how they work. So I'm going to say console.log for with a value of 0, and let's do console.log bar with a value of 0. All right, as you can see, 4 give us less than 1, which is true because 0 is less than 1. Bar also give us less than 2, which is true because 0 is less than 2. But why the difference? The difference is because of the order. Let's first look at 4. With 4, the first condition we check is x or the given number less than 1? If it is, we want the function to return less than 1. Now, once the function returns less than 1, all of this code is not run. JavaScript just returns the string less than 1, and that's it. The function is done. Okay, so we'll not even check if x is less than 2 or anything else because the first condition has been met. All right, that's why we have less than 1, because the first condition is less than 1. But with the bar, the first condition is less than 2. So is it less than 2? Yes. And once it returns less than 2, this will not run. That's why even though 0 is less than 1, it doesn't return less than 1 because it already runs this condition, passes, and then returns this line, and then that's it. Okay, so the order of your conditions or the logical order is very important. You need to take note of that when writing if statements. All right, now let's see the specific challenge for this exercise. So change the order of the logic in the function so that it will return the correct statement in all cases. Okay, so first we have if val is less than 10. Now let me do console.log this. Okay, so 7, when we give it 7 is less than 10, so that's true. But how about we give it 2? Now is 2 less than 10? Yes, that's true, 2 is less than 10. But is 2 also less than 5? Yes, it's less than 5. So we would have loved that since 2 is less than 5, the function would have returned less than 5 instead of less than 10. Okay, but the reason why it's not returning less than 5 because of the order. It first checks less than 10, and if this order passes or this condition is fulfilled, it returns less than 10 and then jumps out of the function. So for us to get the right or more accurate response, we change this to 5, and then change this to 10. Okay, so we've switched the order. Less than 5, the condition less than 5 is checked first before we check whether it's less than 10. Now when we give it a value of 2, it says it's less than 5, which is correct. And then when you give it a value of 7, it says it's less than 10, which is also correct. All right. Okay, so let's move on, just some few lessons, and then we'll end this video, which is part 2 of 3. And then in the next video, we'll move to part 3, which will look at the rest of the basic JavaScript curriculum. So let's keep going. All right, so now let's look at how we can chain multiple if-else statements together, okay? So the way we do that, let's look at this example here. So first we write our if keyword, bring our parentheses, and then our curly braces. So we want to say if num is less than 5, we want to return the string tiny. Okay, now let's chain an else if. The first else if we want to chain is, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to say num is less than, and then I'm just going to say return. So I'm doing this just so I don't have to keep typing else if. So I'll just copy this. Okay, all right. Now if num is less than 10, we'll say return small. If num is less than 15, we'll say return medium. If num is less than 20, we'll say return what? Return large. Okay. And if num is less than, if num is greater than or equal to 20, we will say return huge. Okay, there we go. All right, so now we have multiple else if statement that we've chained it. So you can do this, but as we move on, we'll look at a more appropriate or a cleaner way of doing this. All right. Okay, so let's look at something here. This challenge is called golf code. So in a game of golf, each hole has a par, meaning the average number of strokes a golfer is expected to make in order to sink the ball in the hole to complete the play. Depending on how far above or below par your strokes are, there is a different nickname. So we want to create a function, which we are going to call golf score. This function is going to take 2 arguments, par and then strokes. And then we're going to return the correct string according to this table here. Okay, so if the stroke is 1, we call it hell in 1. So the function will return hole in 1, sorry. If it is less than or greater than par minus 2, we call it eagle, and then we have all these nicknames for the various pars. So par and strokes will be numeric and positive. We have added an array of the names for your convenience. So we have an array of the names, the various names here that we can access. All right, so let's get started. So we're going to say if first strokes, so the number of strokes, if strokes is equal to, let's do a strict equal here, 1, we want to return, so we have the names here in the array, so we want to access it from the names array. So we say name. How do we access the first item? Remember, index 0. Okay, all right. Now we are going to say else if strokes, and okay, let me just do this. I will say return names. Okay, and I'm just going to copy this so I don't have to keep typing the same thing over again. So now if strokes is less than or equal to -2, we want to call it names with an index of 1. So this here, so 0, 1. So that will be equal. Else if strokes is equal to, so I'm just going to, if strokes is equal to what? Par minus 1, I want to call it this right here, birdie. Okay. If names is equal to par plus 1, we want to call it boogie. No, or par. Also, if names is equal to par plus 2, let's call it this double boogie. And then if names is equal to, or wait, it should be greater than or equal to, equal to par plus 3, then it's going to be this right here, names 5, which is go home. That's funny. All right, so that's it. So if, for example, the par is 5, okay, and then you strike 4, let's do console.log, and let's see what we get. Okay, as you can see, we get birdie. If it is 1, we get hole in 1. All right, so that works. So depending on which condition is met, we return the appropriate string. Oops. Okay, so something is wrong. Okay, so if strokes is equal to 1, we want to return hole in 1, which is 0. If it is, okay, so this, I think this was the problem, par minus 2. Okay, so if it's par minus 2, we want to return equal. If it's par minus 1, we want to return birdie. So birdie is 0, 1, 2. Okay, 0, 1, 2. If it is strokes is equal to par, okay, I think I missed 1. So I'm going to say, yeah, I think I missed 1, which is par. So if it's par, it's going to be 3 here. Let's do this 4. This will be 5. This will be 6. So let me see. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, yeah, that should work. Okay. Yeah, this should change to 5. And hopefully this should work now. Yeah, that works. Whew, that was a tough one. Let's continue. All right, selecting from many options with switch statements. Okay, so you can do else if, chain many else if statement like we've done previously, or you can use something we call switch statement. Okay, so it works similar to how the else if statement works, but here is how it works. First, write a switch statement which tests val and set answer to the following conditions. Okay, so first we have our case in switch function, takes an argument of val, and we've declared let answer is to be an empty string. So let's use the switch statement. First, you have to write the switch keyword in order to use the switch statement. Bring your curly braces and then your parentheses. So inside the parentheses, you write what you want to compare, or your condition in this case is val. Okay, so you're going to say case and then 1. This is what we are using. So if the case is 1, bring your colon. We want answer to have a value of alpha, like so. Okay, bring your semicolon, and then we bring a break keyword or a break statement. Okay, let's look at case 2. So it's the same thing, case 2 colon, if val, what is saying, if val is 1, answer should be alpha. If val is 2, answer should be what? Beta. Then break. So break will take it out of the switch statement and will not look at the rest of the cases. So if case is 3, we want answer to be what? Gamma. Alpha, beta, gamma. Break statement. And if case is 4, we want answer to be what? Delta. Like so. And then we bring our break statement. All right, so that's it. So val, which we have here, the figure that will be given, or the argument that will be given. If it is 1, we want the answer to be alpha. If it is 2, we want the answer to be beta. If it's 3, gamma. If it's 4, delta. All right, so let's just do a console log and try out some cases. So if it's 1, we have alpha. If it's 2, we have beta. If it's 4, we have delta. All right, let's move on. Okay, so in our previous statement, we did 1, 2, 3, and 4. But what if we had a situation where we had a value of 10 or 7, which wasn't in any of the cases that we provided? So we have something we call a default statement. So the default statement, usually you should provide it as the last statement, okay? So that if none of the cases are met, then the default statement will be used. So let's see an example, okay? First, we want to say switch because we want to use the switch statement, bring our parentheses and our curly braces. So I'm going to say, in this case, val, and then case, if val is A, so I'm just going to do this just so I wouldn't have to type everything again. So I'm going to say answer is equal to empty string, and I'll say break. Okay, so I'll just copy this so that I don't have to type it all over again. So first one we want to check is case. Copy. First one will be case. If case is A, then answer should be apple, and then we have our break statement. How about if case is B, then answer should be bird, and then we have our break statement. How about if case is C, answer should be cat, we have our break statement. Then let's say none of these, case is neither A, B, or C, then we're going to use what we call the default statement, okay? So in this case, answer is going to be stuff. Then we break out of it like so. All right, so let's test it out. So console.log. Okay. Let's say 1. All right, so as you can see, 1 is neither A, B, or C. So none of these cases are met. So we have stuff. So if we have A, we have apple, B for bird, C for cat, D for stuff, because D is neither, the case for D is not provided. All right, let's continue. Okay, so another thing we can also do with switch statements is that instead of having a case each for all of the cases, we can have one case or one result for multiple cases, okay, like we have here. So for example, let's write a statement to set answer to the following ranges. If it is 1 to 3, we have low, 4 to 6 mid, 7 to 9 high. Okay, so let's just say first switch, bring your parentheses, curly braces, and then let's do case 1. So this should be val. So if it's case 1 or case 2 or case 3, Then we want an answer of low. So let me just say low, or let me just say this brick. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this so that I don't have to repeat it. All right, so if it's 1, 2, or 3, then we want an answer of low. If it is, let's do 4, 5, or 6, want an answer of mid. And then if it is 7, 8, or 9, want an answer of high, like so. All right, so now let's do examples. So you can do a console log just to test it out. Okay, let's provide it with an answer of 9 is high, 7 is also high, 2 is low, 6 is mid. All right, let's move on. Okay, so we're almost there. We're almost done with this video. If you have many options to choose from, a switch statement can be easier to write than many chained if-else statements. Okay, like I said earlier. All right, so let's see, change the chained if-else statement into a switch statement. So like we have here, there's all many chained else-if statements. So we want to use switch statement instead. So we say switch, bring our parentheses, our curly braces. Inside our parentheses, we have val. Okay. Now, if case, so let me say this, colon, I'll say answer is equal to, again, I don't want to be repeating, so I'll just do this and copy. Okay, so first, if val is Bob, or if the case of Bob, answer should be Marley. That's Bob Marley. Wow. Okay, next up is val is 42. That's a number, so I'll remove the quotation. If val is 42, answer should be the answer, like so. Next up is val is 1. Again, this is a number 1. I will write there is no number 1. Okay. Also, if val is 99, or if the case is 99, which is also a number, I'll say missed me by this much. Next up, if the case is val is 7, which is also a number 7, I'll write ate 9. All right, I think this should work. Now I'm just going to comment this out first before I delete. Okay, it works. So now let me just go ahead and delete it. All right, as you can see, the switch statement is cleaner and it's easier to read. Okay, so that's why it's more preferable. But I mean, either of them, whether you use else if statements or switch statements, you are allowed to do so. Okay, so finally, let's look at this last challenge for this video. So you may recall from comparison over equality operators that all comparison operators return a Boolean of either true or false statement. So sometimes people use an if-else statement to do a comparison like this. So you can say is equal, that's your function name, AB. If A is equal to B, return true. Else, which means if A is not equal to B, return false. And there's a better way of writing this, which is more simpler and easier to read. So you can just say return is equal A and B, which is your parameter, and just say A is equal to B. So in that case, if A is equal to B, the function will return true. And if A is not equal to B, the function will return false. Okay, this makes it easier and more cleaner to write and read. So let's try it out with this is less function that we have here. So instead of writing all of this if statement, if else statement, we just say return A is less than B. That's it. So I'll just take this off and that's it. Let's run it. All right. So this has been a long video, so I'm just going to end here, and we are going to, like I said, this is part 2 of 3. So the next video will be part 3 of 3, where we'll go through the rest of the basic JavaScript part of the curriculum. Okay, so thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a comment below, like and subscribe, and you can share the channel also with your friends who are also learning how to code as well. And let's have fun coding. So happy coding and see you in the next one. Bye bye.